It's like, why am I not excited about my faith anymore? Why does it feel like a chore to be praying my rosary? And honestly, boredom might be a way God is calling you to slow down and to calm down and to not be so overstimulated. I just really think it's important for us to take physical action because it's so easy for us to sit down and intellectually get wrapped up in the faith and read books and all that stuff, and we completely forget about the physical side of the faith. I talk a lot about spiritual warfare, dark night of the soul, basically all of that jazz, and I've been there, done that, I have experienced that, so I can talk about those things. But what happens when we simply just become bored in our faith? I think we're a little too quick to peg a dry season or disinterest in the faith as some sort of spiritual warfare. And it's like, yeah, maybe some of it is, but I do think a big portion of it is just being bored. I mean, you look at your Bible or your rosary, you're sitting in the back pew at mass and you're just kind of looking around and you just feel nothing. Kind of just like a pure meh. You know the routines, you know the homilies, you've been there, done that, you've heard this topic a million times. You could probably preach it on your own if you actually had to, or at least predict where those homilies are going based off of how the priest is talking. And honestly, overall, I feel like sometimes prayer can feel like reading the back of a shampoo bottle for the 50th time. And I know when I was going through my bored moments, people would tell me, oh, just pray harder. And I genuinely thought I was gonna lose my mind when they told me that. So I'm gonna tell you something that might be considered controversial depending on who you ask, but it is totally normal and almost expected that you will be bored of your faith at one point in your life or another. And I think part of that's because, especially in today's world, we're very emotional in our faith. We kind of base our faith based off of feelings, as in how many goosebumps we get, how emotional we get about something. And I think this happens a lot when we go to high energy type of events or camps where we're around a lot of other Catholics and we're super passionate about our faith. And then we come home and then we're in the mundane, we're in the day-to-day life, and we feel like we've lost that spark with God. It's like, why am I not excited about my faith anymore? Why does it feel like a chore to be praying my rosary? And then there were some days where, for me personally, like I couldn't even look at my Bible without groaning or being like, I don't wanna. But in my opinion, boredom is not a sign that your faith is broken or it's dying or I don't know, whatever. I think it's just something that naturally happens, and maybe it's because of the way you've been in your faith and maybe you've outgrown that way of living your faith out and you need to try something new to kind of spice it up and, get out there. Because I think boredom kind of happens when we get into too rigid of a routine where we do the same thing over and over and over again, day in and day out. It's the same thing. It becomes really, really predictable, and then when we go to these retreats or we go to these other places and we get on this emotional high, it's almost like we need to spice our faith up, but not to the point where we also need a dopamine detox. I personally don't think you need more content or worship music or vibes or workshops or just emotional highs or anything like that. I don't think that is the cure. If anything, I think that just makes us more emotionally turbulent in our faith, because when I would go to these types of retreats and everything, I would be on this super high from just being around other Catholics and the worship music, and I would just feel really, really on fire and passionate for the faith, only for that feeling to die off probably like a week later, and it would make me almost want to like chase that feeling, and it became somewhat of like almost an addiction in some ways, like a dopamine addiction. But the point is just that's just not what our faith is about. That's not what it means to be a Christian. And I think there are seasons in other relationships where we might not feel as close to somebody, or we might lose connection with somebody, but then we get coffee with them or something and it's like the connection's re-sparked and all that stuff. It's like you still love the person who you have lost contact with. I do this like all the time with my friends because we live in different states, where I literally will go without talking to them for like a couple months, and then they're like, hey, I'm in Chicago, or hey, I'm in Missouri, or whatever, and it's like we grab coffee, we catch up, it's great. But sometimes you will have lulls of activity in the relationship, and that's just perfectly normal. And so it's perfectly normal to have the same thing in your spiritual life too. Before I yap your ear off some more, I first want to tell you guys about the new planner from Blessed Is She. I'm plugging this now because you guys can officially start using this planner in July, and I am so excited for it. As a new mom, I'm currently 28 weeks pregnant, I think. I'm very type B. And because I'm type B, I need to be extra vigilant about staying organized and staying on top of everything, especially with the baby coming. Maybe you're in a different area of life than I am, but I know we all strive to be more organized with our life, and what better way to do that than with a Blessed Is She planner. Everything you need is in this planner, from an examination of conscience to holy days of obligation to meal planning to how to make a holy hour, etc. If you're a student or you're a mom or you know somebody who is, this would be the perfect gift. I am so grateful that I have this planner so that when Beanie comes, I can be as organized as possible, which will simultaneously make my life so much easier. So if that's something you guys are interested in, you guys can go to the link below in the description and you guys can use my code AMBER10 for 10% off. And with all of that being said, let's get back into the video. And I think too many people base their faith off of how they feel and like their feelings, because as human beings we are very emotionally turbulent, and having emotions in themselves are not a bad thing. The problem is when we let those emotions control us and we let those emotions take over and basically override our intellect and I guess common basic, I don't know, thinking skills. So in my opinion, it is good to be bored at times, or to just not feel like wanting to do something but then doing it anyways, because that is how you build virtue. And then on top of that, it also helps us tame the emotionally turbulent emotions. So one thing that always helped me when I was feeling bored in the faith was just going back to the basics of the faith, not overwhelming myself with a bunch of different devotions or trying to get to adoration every single day or trying to get to daily mass. Instead, just literally going back to the basics of a daily morning offering, calling to mind God at the middle of the day or when I had a lull in my day or something like that, and then evening prayers with my husband. And then basically chucking everything else out. I will add it back in later, but basically when I'm bored, I do what I can that I know I can do well. So outside of going to mass on Sundays and holy days of obligation, I basically just try to simplify my prayer life. But the prayers that I do pray, I try to do very well. And sometimes it is really beneficial to switch things up if I feel like it. If I feel like there's a certain devotion I really want to try, or I feel like there's a saint that I want to try, you know, asking intercession from, or maybe there's a retreat or there's a talk or something, I will try to go to that to try and like spice things up and stuff. But at the end of the day, sometimes you're just bored. And that's just the way it is. But if I can, I mean, let's say I normally read my Bible while I am drinking coffee in the morning. Instead of doing that, I will take my Bible to a park, or I will take it to the car or a coffee shop or something like that, and I will change my scenery and I'll like change my environment. I also tend to pray silently in my head or by myself, and so maybe I'll go and walk in nature or something and pray, or maybe I'll try praying out loud, or maybe I'll do more prayer journaling, because prayer journaling always gets me out of a slump. I don't know what it personally is about prayer journaling that helps me so much, but it does. So, but I think one of the most important things we can do if we're feeling bored is just let the boredom be. You know, sit in silence for 10 minutes, be bored. We live in a very overstimulating world where we are constantly bombarded with noise and sounds and movies and this and that. And honestly, boredom might be a way God is calling you to slow down and to calm down and to not be so overstimulated. So if you're feeling bored, sit with that for like 10 minutes. Sit with it for 5 minutes if you can't handle 10 minutes. But I just try to do that because I think that it's important to be able to sit in silence. And there are very few people who feel comfortable enough to actually do that. And then of course, also when you're bored with your faith, I think a lot of us can get wrapped up in the whole intellectual side of things a little bit too much, as opposed to actually going out and physically living our faith out in the world. So like helping out at a soup kitchen, or volunteering at your church, or cooking a meal for somebody in need, offering to go get groceries for your neighbor. I just really think it's important for us to take physical action, because it's so easy for us to sit down and intellectually get wrapped up in the faith and read books and all that stuff, and we completely forget about the physical side of the faith, where we should be taking care of each other and loving our neighbors and all that stuff. And so I have found when I'm stuck in like my boredom kind of cycle, if I get out and I start physically living the gospel out in my life every day and not just online or through books and prayers and things like that, it actually does help quite a lot. But then of course, let's say all of this fails and I'm still in some sort of boredom and I don't know what to do about it. I will talk to my friends, because friends are great, as long as you have the right type of friends, that is. But yeah, I'll just be honest with them. Like, I'm going through a dry patch. I don't feel as passionate about my faith right now. I don't know what's wrong necessarily. I don't know what to do. Nothing else I'm doing is working. And then sometimes just like grabbing coffee and talking about the faith with a friend is enough to snap me out of my boredom, and just having somebody else to converse with and just talk about the faith with and share my hopes and my dreams and where I want to be in my faith and where I am in my faith right now. Sometimes that's all I need. Now, it doesn't always help, but I will say that a majority of the time it at least makes me feel more inspired to get back into things and to have a little more motivation to do stuff. But I also just have awesome friends who give me some awesome advice and also just are there with me through it, not always giving me advice, but just like, I don't know, just sitting with me and being able to be there for me. And then of course they always bring things up that I have never thought of before, and so it's really great to have good Catholic friends. But basically, at the end of the day, you are going to go through highs and you're going to go through lows of your faith. That is just a part of being human. That is a part of the human experience and being Christian and your relationship with God. But what is most important is that you do not give up in your faith because you're bored, and you let the boredom win in that way. Basically, what I'm saying is, like, you still have an obligation as a Catholic to go to church, to go to holy days of obligation, to have a relationship with God through prayer. How prayer life looks depending on the season you're in is going to be completely different depending on who you are, where you are in life, like I said, your season of life. So I'm not going to be able to give you like specifics, oh, this is how your prayer life should look like when you're bored in your faith, because everybody's going to be different. I already told you what I do. I go back to the bare bone basics. But basically, just like do what you're able to do in this season of life. Again, that's going to look different for everybody, but God knows and he sees you. And you know what? At the end of the day, if your boredom is causing you a lot of anguish or strife or concern, it's always great to go to your priest and talk to him about it. They are literally there to give you pastoral advice and to give you information, and they should be able to give you personalized advice as well. And at the end of the day, I think that's just really helpful and really important, so maybe that's something to look into as well. But with all of that being said, guys, that's all I have for you today. I would love to know your opinions about this in the comment section below. Do you struggle with boredom? Do you think it's more spiritual warfare than boredom? How do you snap out of a boredom season in your faith life? All of that stuff. Comment below, and yeah, we'll chat in the comments. God bless you guys. Bye.